Welcome back to Open Window Politics. Today we're going to be doing a prediction between one of the congresswomen from New York, that being Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, and then on the Republican side we'll be going with the current vice president of the U.S. and at the moment Republican frontrunner for the 2028 presidential primary nomination. We've still got a while before then, but at the moment he is looking like the most likely for the Republicans. There are generally a few other candidates that are ahead of AOC in the Democratic primary polling that's been done so far, but these have both been floated as potential options for the general election. So I will start out in the West and then in the East. So I will start out with the state of Nevada. I think it would have gone... I think it would have gone to J.D. Vance had AOC been the nominee in 2024. Ultimately, the state even went to Trump in 2024, and that kind of shocked the nation. So the state has been known to vote for Republicans. They have a Republican governor, and like I mentioned, we're willing to vote for Trump in 2024. However, I think that with national trends favoring Democrats, I think if it were a Democrat like Pete Buttigieg or Andy Beshear, that the state would actually be in the lean blue margin. But because of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's more progressive policy messaging, that it would deter some key voting demographic groups. Ultimately, I don't think that would be enough for the state to not go blue, but that it would narrow up and end up in the tilt blue column. Arizona, I'm going to put that into J.D. Vance's column. This state went to Trump by the biggest margin of all the swing states, and it actually went by a lean margin. I don't think it would go by a lean margin if the election were to be held today between these two candidates. I would put it in the tilt, but nonetheless, that is still going to be a victory for J.D. Vance, and that will add 11 electoral college votes to his total. And then I accidentally had the district here in Nebraska. So this is the Omaha region. It's Nebraska has an interesting system where they divvy up their congressional districts per electoral college vote, and really only one of them is competitive. There is one that's in the likely category, but that almost certainly will remain in the Republican category. However, the Omaha district, I think, has a reasonable shot of remaining blue. This district also went blue in 2024. And that was not a great election year for Democrats, so not too surprising that it would remain in the Democratic Party's column in an environment that is much more favorable for Democrats at large. So that is going to be the district there in Omaha. And then I'll get to the other half of the Sun Belt. I think Georgia, most Democrats I have winning Georgia. I think AOC would probably lose it. Just again, some more progressive Democratic Socialist messaging would be a deterrent to some key voting demographic groups throughout the country, but especially in the core 7 swing states. And I don't think that Georgia would be an exception to that, so that is going to be the state of Georgia. And then North Carolina, feel even more confident in putting that in J.D. Vance's column. This state, I think virtually every Republican I've predicted has won this state. Generally, I just do J.D. Vance, but generally Democrats have lost the state, and it is a favorable environment for Democrats at the moment, but I wouldn't argue it is necessarily 2008 level favorable for the Democrats. So that state is going to remain in the Republican category. However, both North Carolina and Georgia do have Senate elections coming up in November during the midterms. And whatever way those two races end up going can give us an idea of which way the states are leaning on the presidential level. There are many voters that only vote in the presidential level, so it's not a perfect test, but still we'll keep an eye on the midterms for those two states. And that brings J.D. Vance to 262. And I'm going to start with Wisconsin in the Rust Belt. I think Wisconsin is probably the second most likely state to end up in the Democratic Party's column. AOC, I think, would do well enough to win this state. I think if it were a different Democrat, more moderate Democrat, it could possibly result in a lean. But really, the core 7 swing states are by nature swing states. They're going to be close pretty much regardless of whoever the nominee is on either political party. So I think it would be enough of a Democratic favorable environment to elect AOC not on the presidential level, but to win the state of Wisconsin. I think Pennsylvania and Michigan are I probably would start with Pennsylvania as being J.D. Vance's best chance at winning a Rust Belt state. He's definitely got some Rust Belt charm. He was a former senator from Ohio, grew up in the Rust Belt area, and has definitely got some Rust Belt charm that I think would be crucial in winning the two, the most important state of Pennsylvania. It's both worth the most electoral college votes, and holds a heavy weight, and is a good, really crucial for either campaign to win. And Michigan, I think, would probably be the second most likely state to end up in J.D. Vance's column, but it will, if I were to call it, if the election were to be held today between these two candidates. So that leaves us with 296 for J.D. electoral college votes for J.D. Vance to 242 for AOC. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.